After a very, very long summer break, and I'm sorry, dear listeners, it was a very important and valuable summer break for me, traveling to Europe, as you might have seen on social media. Anyway, Singletrack is back and better than ever. To hear about what makes Singletrack so amazing, for the next 200 episodes, you have to listen to all the way to the end of this episode, and we have some very important announcements to make. But before we dive into this week's episode with the incredible Michael Linscott, who is an incredible ultra runner, ran 300 milers in less than a year, and is also the very humble and amazing admin for the Seattle Mountain Running Group Facebook page. Group situation, over 5,000, almost 6,000 members strong, and he manages that group alongside of me and a few other people, but he is the main guy who's been leading this group and answering all the important questions of where to run in the Pacific Northwest and luckily not what shoes to buy. But he's on the show this week, and before we dive into this episode, I need to tell you about an incredible product that I've been eyeing for a couple years, and I've been thinking about for a long time, and I finally got my hands on it, and I gotta tell you about it. It is the Orange Mud Transition Wrap. OrangeMud.com has a whole bunch of cool products, and the Transition Wrap is my favorite. It is a towel, a seat cover, and a changing wrap. So, picture this. You come back from a run, you're muddy, sweaty, dirty, and you get to your car, and then what, right? The towel is all important, and we've already figured this one out, that having a towel in your car is always helpful. This is a really big towel, but what makes it even more amazing is two additional features. It allows you to tie the towel easily around your waist, so you can quickly and modestly and publicly get changed, which is super helpful. And when you're done with that, you can take the zipper on the back. There are a whole bunch of like little gadgets on this towel, and then you can flip it, put it over your car seat, over the headrest, and it's long enough that it drapes along your car seat, so you can sit in your car and you don't dirty your car seat, and you can drive safely home. So an incredible cool product. It works just as advertised. It comes in super cool colors. It actually solves a real problem. It is a little bit specialized, so it is, you could just use a regular towel, but it does have these cool features that if you ever try to wrap a towel around your waist and do something with it, usually it pops over off. This towel allows you to sort of adjust it around your waist properly with some hinges on there, if you will. And then it has that cool zipper that allows you to drape that towel over your car seat, and you can drive home and your car is not a complete mess. So visit orangemud.com. That's ORANGEMUD.com for more information on their incredible transition wrap. I got it in bright, garish, amazing, cool green. And thank you, Orange Mud, for supporting this week's episode of Singletrack. Yes, it is episode 200. And as I said, I've got more announcements about this at the tail end of this episode. But now, without further ado, let's dive in and have this incredible conversation with Michael about his race, Cascade Crest, and the latest race. And yes, I'm talking about my race, my very sad and unfortunate DNF at Ultra Tour Monte Rosa 100K. So listen up. Michael, thank you so much for coming back. Last time you were on the show was like way early on. And we talked about two things. One was you had just done rim to rim to rim, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And we had a great conversation because I had done it. And so there were lots of stories there. One of them, that's the story that I still sourly remember is you telling me what amazing experience you had at Phantom Ranch, and my experience was very, very different with Phantom Ranch not providing any sustenance, any hydrations other than a water spigot outside for people that didn't stay, and you had actually a great time refueling down there.
Yeah, I'll always think of that lemonade kindly after the fact because I get to put it up against yours where it was just warm water. Cold lemonade and a styrofoam cup will always sit kindly in my memory.
Damn. Well, the other thing that connects us is, and that wasn't back then, but we are now more or less the sole administrators of probably, I don't know, do I want to be hyperbolic? One of the largest mountain trail running groups on Facebook, right?
Yeah, it definitely maybe in the United States. I don't know what European Facebook groups look like, but yeah, there's a lot of people in Seattle Mountain Running Group.
Yeah, we've comfortably, well, I mean, we're on the way to like 6,000 now, because how many people constantly join every week and request access. And that's the other thing. It's not an open group. We actually do filter people out and or sort of have a barrier to entry. We want people to actually be local, reasonably local to the Pacific Northwest, have some kind of connection to trail running. And this is not almost 6,000 runners and counting 3/4 of them being spam bots from some server farm in India. These are actually all runners. How many of them are active is a different story. Right. But it's fun to manage a group like this. It's also exhausting, right? Because Facebook is exhausting, and yeah, these groups are an incredible source of information sharing, right? And I think especially, I mean, we're heading now into the fall. I think once the first snow hits and the weather changes, I think these kind of groups are becoming super valuable to runners seeking information with, like, you know, what trails are still open, what's the snow line looking like, and things like that, right?
Yeah, it seems like every fall is the same, kind of what's still open, but same with the spring. It's motivational because you see people saying, okay, what trails are opening up? And you see these photos of this trail, you know, is snow free now, get out there. And then the summer, you know, sometimes I just want to not be on Facebook because it's the middle of summer and it's a beautiful day, but I'll pop onto Seattle Mountain Running Group and there's 5 people posting these epic mountain runs that they've done that are anywhere from 3 miles to 33 miles. And I just get motivated again.
Yeah.
All year long.
No, it is really true, right? It is a good mixture. I mean, you know, yes, it is a group of thousands of people, so you get the endless and perpetual question that for us, having been on this group for years, kind of starts getting a little bit tiring because there's a new people and they're asking questions. So it's unfair for us to be tired, but there are repetitive questions of like, I need a physical therapist and I am looking for the best running watch or whatever it is, right? So you get sort of the same question. And
2 hours of Seattle.
What's that?
Or your favorite trail within 2 miles of Seattle.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that, right? And ultimately that's a little bit Facebook's fault. We at some point a couple years ago we tried to sort of find a way of adding like hashtags and topics to particular posts so people could search, but Facebook is always about the conversation in the now, if you will. So anything that was asked 3 months ago, 3 days ago is essentially gone, right?
Yeah, and if something was posted a year ago and somebody re-comments on it, it pops to the top of the feed, whether it's relevant or not.
Yeah, and that's on top. So technically there is a search function. So somebody who is looking for a physical therapist could potentially search the group and actually find tons of responses. But I mean, on Facebook, one doesn't do that, and it's not really clear how it's done. So, social media has completely replaced the way these old user group forums used to be, but the user group forums allowed you to have conversations sort of in buckets and pin them to the top and make it a little bit easier for people to find relevant stuff, right? Because these questions are real questions, and, you know, ostensibly if we would put more effort in, we could sort of group this together and say, okay, we pulled out and every time people ask for physical therapists, these are the top 5 mentioned. So we just kind of have them on the side or somewhere, right? But it's too hard to do on Facebook.
The one thing we did pull away about, I don't know, 5 years ago is gear. Gear sales, kind of gear resale. We have our own forum for that, which did bring down kind of the I'm selling a pair of used shoes posts significantly.
Yeah.
But it's hard to make a new group for physical therapist searchers or a new group for whatever X question is this week, because we kind of want to keep that all in Seattle Mountain Running Group, but maybe somebody else has done that. Maybe that's why our group is 5,000-6,000 people, because we look at all those questions.
No, yeah, it's true. I think that there's an upper threshold. I was inspired when I first joined, when I was trying to introduce these hashtags by a group called Basecamp. It's an international outdoor jobs and career group, and they have I think 25,000 people or so, and they have pretty strict guidelines just because they have such a large group of people regularly posting, and many of them are job seekers and stuff, and so they're really trying to pare down what can be said. But in general, our posts that we're getting, I mean, we have to take down so few posts, we have to do so little kind of social management that, I mean, somewhat our complaints are really light compared to what we could be dealing with, right? I mean, especially if you think of Facebook and the toxicity, very few political comments, very few derogatory or flippant or mean-spirited stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've done a pretty good job over the past years, you and I, and before that, people just making sure the people in the group, like you said, aren't bots or aren't, just somebody on there just to spam or to be mean. But maybe it's just the inherent nature of trail runners. There's just not a lot of, like you said, divisiveness or bitterness on there. It's all pretty up and positive.
Yeah. And I suppose because I guess we're filtering out the spam bots right from the get-go. We don't really let company accounts on it to constantly advertise their stuff. You end up getting a group that is really interested in exactly what the group is all about, right? Seattle, Pacific Northwest, the larger region, mountain running. I mean, who's into mountain running, right? I mean, it already by itself sort of self-selects the people who are truly interested in that kind of stuff. And so I think it brings a good group of people together, and in some respects it's fun and it's an honor to sort of manage a group like that, just because it's growing actively and people are helpful too. I mean, that's the beauty too, right? I mean, if we would have to be the ones who constantly have to pop in the address of the physical therapist on the east side or west side or wherever, then it would get old. But people in general jump up and respond and offer help.
Yeah, and few, derogatory comments or spam comments that we get are usually not self-report. They're reported by somebody else in the group that cares about the group, and they write me or let me know or post a moderator note this post, and we don't really have to do a lot of scrolling just to see if the posts are positive. If there's somebody that posts something that somebody thinks is negative or derogatory, we hear about it from somebody else in the group that cares about it.
Yeah, it's true. It's a very cool group. So it's cool. And, thank you. You've been doing this for a lot longer than I have. This past few weeks I've been letting it slide because I was in Europe, and somehow I guess, I don't know, if I don't have the Facebook app on my phone, and if you go on the web on Facebook, and it's super meta, I don't know if anybody who listens cares about it, but I can see the member requests, but I can't see their answers to our questions, so they just don't show up at all. So I can't really accept people on the phone. I need my computer open for it, and so if I'm not on my computer, then I slow down a little bit.
Yeah. And that is, maybe people don't know, but that is one of the few things I've added is I ask just, what's your connection to the Seattle Mountain Running Group area, and what's your connection to running, just so I at least get some answers. And if somebody says, I have none, I just want to be in your group or whatever, then we kind of have to think about it. But generally it's, I live outside of Olympia, and I run, in the Capitol Forest all the time, and I say, okay, I know that's a real person because they give me a real answer. Yeah. Sometimes somebody will be on there with no answers for 2 weeks, and I know that's probably just a bot, and I just say no.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that those questions work really well. They aren't too difficult, but you do get a little bit of an insight. And yeah, if somebody doesn't make a big effort in answering, then it's a lot easier, and you feel a lot less guilty not letting them have access to the group. It's like, well, you want to be part of a group where it's all about participation, and you're not participating in answering these questions. So most likely, you don't need to be in that group.
Yeah. If your first step is to go onto Facebook and want to be part of the group, and then your second step is to not answer the questions, the simple questions we ask, then yeah, maybe it's not worth the effort for you.
Exactly. Or for us in that case.
Or for us.
All right, Michael, let's talk about running.
Yeah.
You've had a super, super busy year. I just browsed Ultra Sign Up, and you just tapped it off with a incredible run at Cascade Crest 100-miler. Arguably the biggest 100-miler here in the Pacific Northwest, right? Big history. You've run it several times before. Let's talk about Cascade Crest a little bit, and then we can kind of go down the line and see what else comes up. I don't know, perhaps Monte Rosa or something.
Go ahead.
Yes. So tell me about Cascade Crest, because I actually don't know anything about it. So this will be a fun conversation. I can be really dumb. I know, as I said, it's the biggest race. So I'm curious, as you've done it before, tell me a little bit about what this race means to you, what it feels like. Tell me a little bit about the terrain and stuff. I'm just super excited to hear about it.
Yeah, it starts out. Well, normally it starts out in Easton, off of I-90, up in the mountains in Washington, and it's been around a long time. I don't know if it's the biggest 100 in Washington or in the Northwest anymore, but it's probably one of the classics that's been around. It gets about 150 runners, and it runs on the PCT, the Pacific Coast Crest Trail, for about 30 some miles, then pops down onto the trail that runs through the Snoqualmie Tunnel. So it's about a 2.5 mile tunnel that's pitch dark.
Oh yeah.
And that's almost a lifetime experience, just that tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
So you're at mile 50 and you've done some pretty amazing trails and then done the tunnel, and you pop out at Hyack, which is a huge place for crew and aid. And then you run up and over Cochise Ridge, and then over to the Needles, which is then some really, really beautiful but really brutal elevation gain trails that are kind of pretty secluded, pretty far out there, and I think that's kind of why it's a hard rock qualifier. A lot of this trail is just out there. You can't really, there's not a lot of spots to drop. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's easier just to continue on than it is to drop. The people in this race, and I've done quite a few races, the people at this race are just special. I think they all know that this is a special race. They all try really hard. Each aid station is kind of a little different, whether it's, grilled cheese sandwiches or quesadillas, or one station has pancakes with bacon, blueberries, that they pick blueberries from the trail and they put them in the pancakes right there for you, and
amazing.
Hash browns. One station is French cabin, and they have champagne and mimosas and French and croissants for breakfast. Every station is literally like a spoiler of your trail running. I've done other hundreds and gotten into an aid station and felt like, where's the mimosa and the baguettes? And
you got spoiled.
Coca-Cola and goo. Sorry, and it just spoils you from that standpoint, as well as just the people. It's just an amazing race.
Mm-hmm.
It was my 5th one, and
like really your 5th time Cascade Crest.
Knowing all these people that you know are going to be there, giving you a hug. Rich and Adam handing you a buckle. I got a silver buckle this year for doing 5.
Nice.
It's really a special race.
So what goes on in my head is immediately this meta conversation of like, why is it that these Pacific Northwest races aren't getting on the national level the same kind of recognition? because what you're explaining now sounds to me like an super iconic race, and it's not new. It is something that's been around, so you can't really blame the newness, the potential newness of a race. But Cascade Crest doesn't sort of bubble up on the larger conversation on the same level as some of the other big races. Is it just because it's not in Colorado, it's not in California? Is it, or am I just not paying attention properly?
No, that's a good point. I don't know why. It is under the radar, and I kind of, liked it that way. It's kind of like when you move to Seattle and all you've heard about it is how gray and rainy it is, and you get here and you realize it's really a beautiful place, and you kind of don't want everybody to know about that. That's how Cascade Crest is. It's kind of this, it's a little under the radar, but maybe part of it too is they only get, I think they're only allowed 150 starters, and maybe you just can't, Western States has 350 starters, so you're going to have exponentially more people there with crew and pacers and family than you are at Cascade Crest, and maybe it just doesn't get that much exposure because of the number of people.
Yeah, Western States get 350 starters, and then each runner has 6 pacers and 15 crew. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, and media, and and your family comes out and cheers you on for and Cascade Crest is just out in the middle of the woods sometimes. This year, obviously, was a little different. There was some fire danger, so they had to reroute the course. But I saw my crew. One of the reasons I like Cascade Crest as well is because it's close to home. I can sleep in my own bed the night before.
Yeah, nice.
Drive up the morning of a race, and then my wife helps me. She's always at the aid station crewing me. And this year, there was really no crew until mile 50, and then I saw her one other time at mile 70, and that was it. And then I saw her at the finish. So if you want your family to fly, halfway across the country, if you're coming from Pennsylvania or something, and you say, let's go take a vacation race, you can cheer me on and see me as I'm running. This isn't the race for that. This is the race for kind of drop your runner off at the start and, ta-ta, I'll see you in 20 or 30 hours. Versus your race, which is more of a vacation.
Yeah, you would think it was a vacation, but it wasn't a vacation. It was brutal. Oh, man. Yes, it was something else. So, number one, congratulations. 5th time finishing Cascade Crest. That's incredible. We can, a little bit later, go down the line a little bit, because doing 300-mile races in 10-month Badger Mountain and Javelina 100 is incredible. And looking at Ultra Sign Up, you've done a whole bunch of racing in between there too to keep it up, especially for somebody like me who now attempted 100-mile and DNF'd, did 100K and finished in June, and then DNF'd at Monte Rosa. Hats off to you. That's a whole bunch of running, successful, smart training and keeping things up. You must be doing something right that I haven't quite figured out yet.
Yeah, it is all a balance. I hired a coach last year when I kind of saw this year was going to be either a wash or I was going to do the best I could to make the best of it. Matt Urbanski, he's been helping me along. I think also too, I've been running hundreds for a while, and only 6 or 7 years, but I've been running ultras for almost 10, and I think the body does kind of settle into a rhythm, and I do understand when I'm pushing it too hard or I'm not pushing it enough. So I think with those 3 things combined, I think that was a successful year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Fantastic. And for me, it was the first time pushing into the 100 distance. So in some respects, it was also the first time I saw DNF. So clearly I was pushing in a way and trying some things that I had never done, and being somewhat disappointed because I had never DNF'd before and DNF'd, and not just at this distance, but also at this location, at this opportunity. Obviously stings a little bit. Monte Rosa didn't go as well as I wanted to. I'm trying to figure out how to set the scene, right? It was, you were talking about Cascade Crest, that you can sleep the night before in your own bed, right? Yeah. This is the absolute polar opposite. I took my family. We spent close to 2 weeks of doing vacation before we even drove up to Grächen, just outside of Zermatt in Switzerland. And so I didn't know what that would do to my body. We did some hiking. We did a lot of time spending on our feet walking around, but obviously I didn't do any more specific training. And I mean, it's 2 weeks before a race, so we're already somewhat in taper territory, but that definitely had an effect. The other thing that Grächen and that valley that I sort of didn't really calculate beforehand is that it's the south-facing Alps, so it was actually really dry, because the entire summer long, the Alps had gotten quite a bit of rain, and I was worried that I would encounter potentially even snow up in the high mountains. I think for UTMB the week prior, they activated their cold weather kit and required all the runners to take additional winter potential snow gear with them up into the high country. And for us, even though Grächen, the Monte Rosa area, is literally just a couple mountains over, it was very, very hot and very dry. It felt, in some respects, almost like running in Northern California or so in some areas, just how dusty it was. Right? So the other big thing is that Ultra Tour Monte Rosa, even though it has this sort of iconic name to it, and so you connect it to UTMB, it's almost the polar opposite race of UTMB. But if you go to Europe and you anticipate this can go either ways, right? I mean, if you want this UTMB atmosphere of thousands of runners, thousands of spectators. I talked to Scott, who just finished, friend of mine, finished UTMB, and he said there was hardly a section of the course where there wasn't somebody standing, right? From a course marking, from a just overall presence of knowing where to go, and people were always cheering you on or guiding you around and stuff. And Monte Rosa is very different. Grächen is a small town, a little vacation town, and I mean, we stayed only 300 feet from the starting line in an Airbnb, which was brilliant from a logistics point of view, right? But once you're out running, you are by yourself. You've got the aid stations if you don't miss them, haha. But there's nobody's really even aware that this race is happening. So as you're popping in and out of these little villages that are sort of glued on the hillsides, nobody is aware that there's a race going on, right? So, which can go either way. If you want to race in Europe and you do not want that cowbell nonstop cheering, then that's a good race for you to check out, right? And if you're saying, well, if I'm already going over there, I do want this crazy, almost Tour de France-like atmosphere, then UTMR is definitely not the race for you, right? And in some respects, it could have been that they had to alter the course, because initially the full 100-miler is around the Monte Rosa Massif, which is similar to UTMB, where the Mont Blanc is not just a mountain, it's like multiple summits and multiple peaks, and the Monte Rosa is the same. It's the second highest mountain in the Alps. And so the 100-miler goes around it, and the 100K, similar to the CCC, that starts in Courmayeur and goes to Chamonix. This one starts in Cascade Crest, I don't know how to pronounce this, on the Italian side of Monte Rosa, and then runs into Switzerland. And because of COVID, they had to reroute the course because they couldn't do the border crossing and logistics around it. So they come up with a complete new route. So that could have had something to do with the fact that perhaps the people around weren't quite as aware that this race was happening, right?
Yeah. Is it like Cascade Crest where it's a little under the radar, though? I
think it is. And I think the race organization wants to keep it that way. I have lots of theories around it. I just read a book on how the Swiss people are very private, and even though literally it's, well, I mean, Sierra Sinal, that big race that Killian always runs every year, is like one valley over, and people go nuts over there, right? But I think part of what creates that UTMB atmosphere is that the Tour de France is a high endurance biking event, and the French love this kind of racing, this kind of high endurance racing where you can stand on the side cheering them on and sort of like almost travel from place to place and cheer them on again, right? And so I think it creates this super intense atmosphere. And obviously, UTMB wants it that way, and the amount of runners that are racing this race and creates already a much larger organizational effort on all levels, right? When Monte Rosa is a lot smaller, and I don't know if that's because they haven't grown as big as they want to, or because they really want it to keep it under the radar a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think in general, I don't know if Europe has the same mentality as we often find in the Pacific Northwest, especially where people sort of like, I hope nobody discovers it. I hope I can keep it sort of my private little trail for myself, right? I think in general, people know that, look, the Alps are accessible to everyone. People can come from anywhere, right? So it's not, I mean, it's 20 minutes from the Matterhorn, right? I mean, it's not in a hidden place. It's very clear where this race is and stuff. So, but it was a small group. On the 100K, were only 100 runners, and I think there were only 130 finishers on the 100-miler, right? So, on paper, it says it's 20% harder than UTMB based on the vertical change. And I've not run UTMB, I've not run these trails, but the trails that I did run at Monte Rosa were brutally hard from just the vertical change. I think I was looking at, for the 100K, a vertical change of 23,000 feet. If I would have completed the whole thing. So, anyway, so started off running. First 13, 15 miles were brilliant. You start at 6:30. The morning is beautiful, right? You sort of have the first big climb. As you climb up, you get everything that you want in a European race, right? You've surrounded these valleys around the Matterhorn have the largest cluster of over 4,000 meter peaks. That's sort of the way we consider, I don't know what the exact translation is, right? 4,000 meters times 3 is higher than 14. But in Colorado, you've always got sort of that 14er is sort of that ceiling, that elusive mythical ceiling for peaks. In the Alps, it's everything over 4,000 is magical. And so these valleys around the Matterhorn, there, Monte Rosa area, they have the largest collection of 4,000 meter peaks in the Alps. So it's an absolute breathtaking place to spend any time outside.
Are you taking your camera out when you're doing the race at all, or are you?
I did, and I felt like I took pictures, and then I looked afterwards, and I'm like, what? Those are the only pictures I took? I'm pathetic, right? I should have taken like 10 times more pictures, both from just the vistas in the distance, trying to capture these glacier-covered peaks, which is so unique in the Alps, because we are, we have these volcanoes that are so magical, the way they're standing, but the prominence is so impressive of these volcanoes over here in the Pacific Northwest, but they're standing all by themselves. And in the Alps, you've got snow-covered peaks here and here and here, and a glacier here, and I mean, at every turn you have peaks, and you just can't get, you just can't stop looking. I mean, you could have ruined your race just by constantly looking at these peaks because it's absolutely fantastic. Our Airbnb, we were on the top floor of like a 4-story building, and our balcony was looking out over the valley, and in the distance there was the 6th highest peak in Switzerland, the Weisshorn you could see, and then our bedroom window the other way around had another absolute glorious mountain range. And I'm like, how is this possible, right? It's just being there is already transformative. So yeah, first aid station was great, and then I've run into, and I'm trying to describe what it is. I mean, officially it's called a town, but it's essentially this cluster of farm huts and houses, hay stables, and obviously a few vacation homes and stuff. And so there is a maze of trails and roads that lead through. And many of these little towns, they don't really allow car travel. So the roads are really narrow. And so you don't really know what's a road, what's a trail, and where am I going. And in that town, there was a second aid station. And I can show you the screenshot of the way the route was supposed to go. But essentially, it's sort of a loop. So you would have come into town, you would have had to take a loop and come back to the same spot and then continue on that route back out of town. And at the far end of that loop was the aid station. And I completely didn't prepare myself for this loop and just basically followed the flags through town. And before I knew it, I was at the end of the town, and I'm like, well, wait a second, there was supposed to be an aid station here, right? And I'm like, well, who knows with these aid stations? Perhaps they call them by the name of the town, but they're like a half a mile out of town. I just keep running, right?
Yep.
And I keep running, and eventually I catch up with a guy. Well, to be fair, he caught up with me. And I asked him, I said, did I miss the aid station? He's like, yeah, I did too. It was super confusing marked. And he's like, do you have enough water? I'm like, no, I'm going to be running out. It was then approaching lunchtime, and it was getting really hot. And so he gave me some water, which really saved me, because the next stretch was a huge quad pounding downhill that dropped all the way down to the valley floor. It was probably at least 3,000 feet of loss and super steep. Like, I mean, I've not done, what is the steepest trail on the east side? It's a Mailbox Peak or so. I've not done Mailbox, but like steeper than anything that we find we would consider a hiking trail on the on the eastern facing side of the Olympics. It was super steep. It's like almost mountain bike trail steep, right? The way these mountain bike trails is. And I was actually quite surprised by this, that they are normal hiking trails and they're steep. Even the routes that were leading through little villages were still incredibly steep. I was like, well, we're at the edge of the village now. I've got have a half a mile of flat running. No way. It was just going super. The way they're like sort of glued against the side of the hills there, everything is crazy steep. And I thought I had some good hill training, but really, I mean, Mount Rose was a joke compared to that. And I've done most of my training there. So get down to the valley floor. At that point, I'm completely out of water, and it's like, well, it's 1:00 in the afternoon. I'm like, shit. And then comes one of the funniest stories that I've been telling people, which is a classic European story. Cross the road and climb back up, and there a cluster of like 3 or 4 like vacation homes. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, I'm European. I know how this works. I need to get some water from one of these garden hoses from one of these houses. I don't care how I'm going to do it. And so I rang the doorbell in the first house. Nobody was there. I tried the garden hose on the second, and it didn't turn on. It was on a timer or whatever. And so I went to the third garden hose. It was the third house, and I just refilled my water in the middle of that garden. I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't do that on Pacific Northwest race, because you wouldn't run through a little cluster of vacation homes.
And if you're out on the Appalachian Trail or something, you're going to have these homes with fences and guard dogs around it. That's a very European thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's the other thing. I wasn't worried that I would get shot, so I was comfortable being able to do that there. So I thought I could explain myself if somebody would come out and wave a stick at me or something. So anyway, the next stretch was, I don't know, to probably 2,500 feet of climbing to the aid station, and then another 3,000 feet of climbing after that to sort of the top of the high alpine ridgeline on which you then traversed onwards. And the problem is that by that time, when I finally got water, essentially it was already too late. My legs were starting to cramp up, and whatever I was trying to eat, it just wasn't allowing me to reset. I've never had leg cramps that bad. Even when I'd done rim to rim and I was suffering, I was able to sort of shake any kind of oncoming cramps off, or with like a little 10-minute rest, sort of reset and that keep going. And on that hillside and that heat, having kind of fucked up my nutrition because I've missed the aid station, I sort of was realizing that I wasn't able to recover. I lay down a couple of times, just tried to lay flat as long as I could, trying to get these quad cramps under control, and I just couldn't. And coming then into the third aid station, eventually, I had 50 minutes before cutoff. And I thought, all 50 minutes should be enough to reset myself. I ate a ton, I drank a ton, I tried to sit in the shade and got my pack completely refilled and everything ready to go. And 10 minutes to 4, there was another runner who was leaving the aid station at a point. I said, okay, let's just keep going. And I walked for 200 feet and I had to climb down a set of stairs, and my legs completely gave up. I was like, I cannot move anymore. And the biggest challenge in that situation, and I'm curious if you had experience like that, was that you hear of runners that break through the sort of temporary-ish discomforts and sort of find new strength. And I've never been able to do that in a good way, because overall I was feeling fine. Like my other issues that I've previously had that sort of had slowed me down, and I had to navigate. Like, I was eating fine at the aid station. I was able to keep food down. I had no chafing problems, no toe issues, blisters, nothing. I mean, it was 25 miles in, right? I mean, it was completely just my quads that were cramping in a way that I just couldn't keep going. I don't know if it was a mismanagement of my body not being able to adjust to the altitude well enough, fast enough, and so therefore the lack of nutrition didn't allow blood to flow properly to my legs, or what it was, because I felt like I had done enough climbing that early in the race. I shouldn't have been completely destroyed by these climbs, because they were steep, but I was at 8,000 feet by the time I was done in total of climbing. That wasn't in like 9 hours or something, right? It wasn't really that I was completely killing myself. So I completely don't know what destroyed my legs and why I wasn't able, even after 40 minutes at the aid station, able to recover. And I did have to then make a decision that the next two segments, I had another 2,500 feet of climbing ahead of me, but then the next aid station and the aid station after were both in the high alpine, and it was 4 o'clock, so I would have gone into the night, and there would have been no way of coming back down unless I would have waited out the night and taken a cable car gondola or something down from these huts where these aid stations were, sort of by myself, right? I would have had to essentially pay my own fare, and ended up, I don't know, the gondola would have taken me to some other valley, and then my wife would have had to pick me up or so, right? Yeah. And sort of this decision that I was putting myself into a logistically difficult, dangerous situation, if you will, made me want to do the responsible thing and not freak out my family and not require them to do some kind of, emergency rescue mission for me. And from that aid station where I was, there was a shuttle that I was able to take back. And so I was essentially pulling the chicken cart and saying, my legs are not working, the high alpine and the night is coming, let's just be reasonable here and go home and have dinner, more or less.
Yeah, and the race director probably appreciates that as well, because, it's one thing when you're in the pits and you can't get out of it because your muscles and you're cramping, but it's another when then you get up on top of that high mountain and you're cramping, and now you're so far behind you can't think straight, and somebody else has to make those decisions for you. That's a tough call. It's tough for a race director to say, look, you just don't look like you're capable of going on, or an aid station person to make that call, and then to figure out, how do you get this person down off the mountain that's cramped up so bad they can barely walk? How do I get them an Uber home? So you made the right decision. But it's hard when I've seen your training. You run 20 miles and don't eat maybe as much as you should or drink as much as you should out in these, tough areas and outside of Olympia. And you're never getting mile 20 with those calf cramps.
Yeah.
So you never know what went wrong at a 100-miler. Was it because you spent a week or so with your family walking around, sightseeing? Was it because you
eating too much cake and pretzels?
Yeah. Or was it not? Was that, because for me, like some of my races, I've told myself I'm not going to finish quite as fast as I could because I'm going to spend some of this springtime hiking with my family and going for runs with friends. And if that takes 10% off of my finish time at this 100-miler, as long as I can still finish, I'm willing to forego that 10%. And same with this, a vacation race. You can't say, well, I'm going to sit in my Airbnb for the next week and, eat as healthy as possible and drink just Gatorade and water. You're over there to explore and to enjoy it, and so is your family, and you're a better person for it. So maybe you didn't finish because of that, but maybe not. Maybe it was something else. Maybe your stomach didn't settle from the food the night before, and you were just dehydrated to start. Who knows? Yeah.
No, it is true. It's a difficult thing because I would like to find a reverse. I lost the fight but won the war, because essentially I had the absolute greatest vacation ever, and being able to or having DNF allowed me, essentially gave me an extra day of family time and amazing time in these mountains. The next day I went on a hike with my family, and my mom was there, who hasn't seen the grandkids in 7 years and stuff. So it was all super, super valuable time. And to your point of the race director and the family that would potentially have to do some kind of crazy rescue mission and stuff, it was the right and sensible decision, absolutely. And I was, I also felt like it was good that I was making the decision right away after the aid station, so I could easily return rather than trying to tough it out for another mile and then have to completely backtrack for a mile or something, right? So, no, it was the logical decision, but it does, it does bug me from a competitive running point of view that I wasn't able to, I wasn't able to problem solve in a way and tell my body to get over this in a way, right? To sort of like, you want to, I'm a designer. I want to solve certain problems by designing around it, and I wasn't able to do it. No matter what, it was just over, and in such a way that it was annoying.
Yeah, and there's so many problems you're solving that sometimes it's that 10th one that's hard. You solved the problem. You weren't chafing. You weren't getting blisters. Your shoes are fitting fine. But then you hit the wall of no water, and suddenly, maybe that's a problem. Your body's just like, okay, I've solved all these other problems today. I just don't know how to solve this one.
Yeah. No, exactly. Well,
my first 100-miler, I DNF'd as well, if it gives you any.
Yes, it does.
I was at Zion, and it was a similar thing. My wife and a friend of mine and my son, we all went to Zion, and hiked around, and actually the race director gave you extra points. I don't know what the points were for, but if you did these certain other spectacular, beautiful things the day or two before the race. So we took it full-hearted, and we went out and saw some of the canyons and did Angel's Staircase, which is this hugely beautiful but tough climb, all like within 48 hours before the race. And again, I had a fantastic time. I still look back on those climbs as some great times I spent with my family and friends. But then race day came along, and I had some problems with some muscle cramping in my ab. I think I pulled a muscle and just didn't have it mentally. And my wife said, well, it's only 10 o'clock. If we leave now, you'll be in time to get to the finish line they still have pizza for another hour. And that's probably not what I wanted to hear at mile 62 of 100.
Yeah.
But I went and had pizza and enjoyed it and enjoyed the entire weekend. So I think it was success that way. But B, my wife now knows never to bribe me or even mention that there's something else besides finishing 100. And C, I've finished every 100 since then. I've started and finished 10 since that. So I think failures can make you stronger. For me, it definitely did. For me, I look at a race and I think, okay, what's going wrong? And is it going wrong enough to feel that pain that I had from that DNF? And I think you'll have that going forward.
Yeah. No, I think that's true, right?
Whether that's backtrack 2 miles to get to an aid station before it's 1 p.m. to get some extra water, or study the map differently or whatever it is. But I think it helps us all.
I think the map studying is something that I don't know. I blame myself for not doing that enough at Zion and at UTMR. I felt like both of these races are big enough races that I wouldn't need to. And at Zion it was a different story because I underestimated the course. At UTMR it was that the course wasn't actually, I expected a European race. And I expected that the course and the atmosphere would carry me. And because I was essentially alone for almost the entire day, and there were even, prior to me missing this aid station, there were a few sections where I was questioning where I was going. So the course marking wasn't like over the top amazing. I'm not blaming the race directors for bad course marking, but it was sort of a minimal marking. And if I would have known that beforehand, then obviously I would have done more route checking. And, of course, if I would have stopped in that town and I would have been more like, there needs to be an aid station somewhere. Let's pull out the map and actually see where this is. And I was just so in the zone. I was just like, I'm just going to keep going because it's going to come. It can't be that I'm missing it, right? And I should have been smart about that, right? And I mean, that's such a logistical failure that it doesn't even have anything to do with your body. That I mean, that's even more embarrassing than anything else, right? As somebody who race directs and course marked and thinks about these kind of things from many other aspects, to miss an aid station, and not even one where I'm already delirious at mile 78, but I mean at mile 14, I mean that's just like idiotic, right? Yeah,
I've been to a 50K way down south in California where this was only 3 years ago, and you still had to mail in your registration. So they're kind of off the grid 50K, and they said, you kind of need to be self-sufficient, but we'll have aid stations. And I got to the first aid station and said, could I have a goo? And the lady at the aid station said, what's a goo? So I kind of didn't do my research as well, and I suffered from that race because I was relying on the race or the race director to say, I have 100 or so runners out here, I need to provide them some food. And it was more like, scones that somebody had made at home. It was like a bake sale at every aid station. And there was just but my own fault. But you look at that and you say, I've done a number of races. I should know that I should have something in the back of my pack that can get me in case there's something wrong, or if I miss an aid station.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I don't know what the mountains are like out there by Mount Rosa, but is there water running off the mountain? Could you have brought a filter and just drank from a stream, or is it just so dry because it's on that dry side?
That was the other thing, right? That I there were plenty of places where I could have refilled, but because I was in a section of the trail where there wasn't anything, like the whole entire downhill was so far down the valley, if you will, that because it was going towards a bigger city down at the bottom, I think it was a little bit of an odd trail that wasn't really meant to be a vacation hiking trail where we have cows grazing and you know, with the typical picturesque type deal. It was more of sort of a working trail that was leading through some vineyards, and I expected to find water, and I would have taken water from the sources. I wouldn't have even bothered with worrying about filtering because it's the Alps and I expect this water to be clear again, probably foolhardily. But I was looking for that stuff and I absolutely couldn't. So yeah, I mean, big lesson learned in very much the wrong location to learn that kind of lesson.
Well, like you mentioned, you know, it stings, but you had a great vacation, and I saw your training leading up to it. You had some beautiful, amazing runs, just training for it. You know, just that mental aspect of I'm going to be out there in the mountains. I need to train, and you did a great job that way.
Thank you. No, absolutely. I mean, the training was great. I mean, I do wonder if I would have needed to try to, rather than just hang out at the Olympics where just the overall altitude is lower, if I would have benefited from heading up to Rainier and get some runs above 5,000 feet just to get myself into that physical space of high altitude running a little bit more. That definitely wouldn't have hurt. But yeah, overall the vacation was absolutely phenomenal. I have teenage kids who were the perfect age to fully take a vacation like that in. They got what they were seeing, right? They weren't picky about the food that they were eating, even though it was, you know, foreign to them and different flavors and stuff. Right? It was just all around an absolute incredible time, and for that, it was totally worth it going over. Even though, you know, it was COVID, the whole getting tests done before the flight and then testing before the race and testing after to fly back. And, you know, there were a whole bunch of like additional hoops to jump through that made this whole thing extra crazy on top of it. Right?
Yep.
It is super crazy how you sort of have this shared experience because COVID is obviously a global thing, but then you have every country sort of dealing with it in their own way. And you, so there's the practical thing that in Germany, at almost every like public place, there is a testing center, and you can just download an app and you make an appointment on that app, and you can get a test done instantly, right then and there, with results in 15 minutes. And so there's a practical thing where things are set up differently, but then there's also the way the citizens of that country that were subjected to the same global pandemic, but managed through different sets of priorities and different political thought processes and stuff, right, have had a very different experience throughout all of this, and it's been really fascinating to kind of navigate that whole piece as well. So
yeah, the week before my Cascade Crest, we actually went to Amsterdam.
Oh, that's right.
France. My son's going off to college, so it was kind of our last trip. And same with you. We got tested before we left and tested before we came home. But it was interesting because, like you said, Amsterdam felt like it was open. There was nobody. There was hardly any masks. While people walking around. But the further we got, we got to Paris, and we went to France, and we were outside at a little cafe, and just to sit outside, we needed to open up the app that showed we had been tested.
Yep.
But we didn't have the AstraZeneca vaccine or whatever. We didn't have the European app on our phone. And so even just to sit outside, we showed our actual vaccine cards and said, look, we've been vaccinated. We're from the U.S. Here's our 2 shots. And he was like, okay, I suppose I'll let you sit outside. But it changed geographically, like you said. And I imagine it's the same way around here. I know some states are having races that are kind of full on, and some, up a month ago, Cascade Crest was still like, I don't know if we're going to have it. I don't know if we're going to allow pacers. I don't know if we're going to allow crew. But I did Javelina back in October of 2020, when that was kind of, and it was definitely spaced out. They did it over 4 days instead of 1 day. The race was significantly changed, but some states were racing back in October and some states weren't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is still very much all, hanging in the balance and yep. Regional and just from a race management point of view, it's like super difficult trying to put anything out because you don't. I mean, when I did LBA in August, I didn't know. I felt like we got the permits and everything fine, and we got the main registration through, but like a week prior or so, Delta started really ramping up, and I felt like if that the LBA race would have been a week later or so, there would have even been a chance that I could have gotten the permit pulled just because of the race being in a city park. So everything is fairly close, packed together, right? I mean, you are going out into the woods and running by yourself, and I'm not bringing 500 people together, but still, things looked very shaky for a little bit, right?
That was one thing I did like about Cascade Crest, not the COVID thing, but just to be out there with people and be chatting with a few people and kind of just hear their experiences over the past year, because I know we've all kind of been separated from each other. But race directors have had, as you know, a challenge on their hand, and it's been interesting seeing how some of them do it and some of them do it differently. There were race directors at a lot of the aid stations out there. They're kind of the aid station captains at Cascade Crest. So I'd roll in and kind of chat and say, okay, how's your been?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine it's a tough year for a race director, but the community of trail running is kind of, we're kind of out, like you said, we're outside. We're not 500 people. We're not Boston Marathon. So it's been nice to see them navigate the permitting and all that so we can get back together.
Absolutely. I mean, that's been my impression too, that the excitement of the runners, of being able to get to do this, and obviously it's a huge privilege. We don't have to do this to live and breathe, but to be able to do something that feels normal, is people are super excited, super appreciative, and that's what makes it worth it, right?
Yep.
No, absolutely. So now the big question is, so now for you, you've raced all the way up and down the West Coast and more. Do you ever have a European race on your bucket list? I hate that term, but is that something that you're thinking about? That's something you would do?
Well, this year I got into the UTMB CCC, the 100K version.
What?
But in March, they basically said, you need to decide now whether you want to be on the list or not. And we've just been super careful with COVID, and I just didn't feel like, it's ironic, I went to Amsterdam for fun. This almost the same week I would have been at Courmayeur for CCC.
Yeah.
But back in March, we just said, no, I just don't think that's going to be possible. I just don't think a trip to Europe in August. And again, I wanted my family to come. I didn't want to just be flying over there on my own.
Right.
We just didn't think it was possible. So I pulled my name from the list. And, but then, I've kind of backtracked on, I've always wanted to do Western states. I've always wanted to do hard rock. I've always wanted to do kind of these big name races. And I've been qualifying for them and putting my name in and getting disappointed when the lottery doesn't pull my name. But I'm getting to now where I'm almost, like we talked about earlier, there's so many races that are out there that are under the radar that maybe don't have the Tour de France feel, but that still like your Tour, your Mount Rosa, that's still, I would almost rather do that. And I had never heard about it until you started talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather do that, even if it's, hopefully the course is normal again, and not just around that valley. But I don't need the Tour de France. I don't need the big spectacle. I don't have really a bucket list that I have to do it. But yes, I do want to get out to Europe and and do a race, or if it's not a race, do a like they call a soft rock, or go out there and do UTMB course on your own and see those big epic mountains. But it is nice to sign up for a race and kind of plan for it and push hard. But it's also nice to go out and do it for fun and wake up the next morning and, like you said, go to breakfast with grandma and have some fun. And so,
I mean, the advantage of the Alps, like, I think racing allows you here on the West Coast especially to explore some areas that you couldn't really piece together by yourself. To running hard rock by yourself, you need to have like a Walmsley type crew to make that happen. You need like 10 people who are willing to carry water for you, because it's so remote that you can't really manage this just by yourself. But in the Alps, you absolutely don't need to sign up for a race if you want to see these spectacular areas, because there's so many huts, so many access points where if you are creative and are willing to put a route together, can have absolutely a spectacular time. I think one very popular thing to do in the Alps for Europeans is this Alpine, where you start on the northern side of the Alps somewhere in Germany, and you spend 5 or 6 days and you hike or run over to the southern side. So you completely traverse the Alps, and you can do that with varying difficulties and with varying length. And that's a very popular one, where you sort of start in the northern part and then you end, in northern Italy, in Dolomite region, and the climate's different and stuff. And I think that's something that there are races that do that, and there are just hiking paths that do that are super popular. And so, yeah, you can sleep in these high alpine huts. Obviously, you've got to pre-book, and there's some logistics involved that a race would do for you. But essentially, all of this is very much impossible, and you get to see some absolutely spectacular mountains. I've spoken here on the podcast forever about how much I love the Alps, and I didn't even get to see the Dolomites, but I felt really great that I took my family for the first time to the Alps, because they hadn't really experienced the Alps fully, and they were completely blown away by it. And I felt like very justified that after all this hubbub, I didn't sell them short, right? They didn't go like, what? You've been talking about this for years. That's all you got to offer? And I'm like, no, it was magical. It was magical.
Outside the bedroom window. I mean, it's hard to say no.
Yeah, I know. The week prior, that was sort of spontaneous. We went to Austria and we stayed in this valley. It's like waterfalls coming down left and right. And we took this one gondola up, and it was sort of a mixed day with clouds hanging. So you could see the mountains, but it was certainly not a bluebird day. And we hiked up to this hut and just more or less in a ski resort area. It wasn't the most picturesque place, but this hut was fully catered, full-on restaurant up there. And just before we got to the hut, there were some snow flurries, not like, winter is coming and you got to get off the mountain, but enough that you feel sort of in a adverse climate or atmosphere, right? And you dug into this hut.
Like a vacation. I mean, like I was about to say, like an advertisement. Like,
oh no, for sure. Like I asked the kids several times what their favorite meal was, and they all mentioned that meal up there, because we stepped in, right? And different too, like if you know the dining room at the Paradise Inn up at Paradise, it's this huge cavernous hall. And while that is impressive, it feels really cold in there. And right. And we walk into this hut, and it's like all cozy, wood paneled, and they have like a wood stove burning, and you huddle around the table, and you eat like the most amazing warm and carby foods and stuff, right? And it was totally magical, right? And to be able to get that at a halfway point between a hike, and you get like local food made like with local cheese and stuff, right? It's like it's amazing. It's an experience that you don't get here. Right? Here you get a hot dog at the gift shop or something like that.
Oh yeah, and you stand in line for an hour to get it, and you're all crowded. And yeah, it sounds amazing.
So yeah, I fell in love with the Alps all over again. I would love to find the financial means. Hello, podcast sponsors. To be able to do this once a year, to say, I know I love my mountains over here, and I love how accessible and close they are. But to make it so once every 2 years, okay, I can be reasonable. But to go over there and have a race on the calendar would be amazing. Anyway, one can dream.
What is your next adventure then? I know you're decompressing still, but what's...
So I have to sit back from this. My wife has shown interest in potentially training up for an ultra. She's run trail races. She's runs the Squamish 23K and Beast of Big Creek. So she's done some good burly races, but she's not broken into the ultra distance. And I need to interface with her and see where she's at, because I feel like if I would step back a little bit and give her the time and space to train and train alongside of her, but have to focus on her. I don't know we haven't really come up with a good time frame and a good race to target, but I think that's kind of what I'm currently seeing on the horizon, just because Monte Rosa was such an experience. It's hard for me to sort of top this or to look past and saying, even if I DNF'd, to say, I'm going to sign up for a little 50K here. I need a little breather to kind of to think about it.
That's a good reason to take a breather. I like it.
I like it, right? I think it's good. It's weird. I haven't been to Mount Rainier at all this entire summer. So I hope that I get to go out there at least once, just for, even if it's just a hike. But from a racing point of view, but again, who knows, if I'm spontaneously catch the bug, who knows, I might I haven't really thought of winter races either yet, because we had such a dry summer and everything that I can't even think of, because there is something special about winter running and racing too, right? Where you have to bundle up and where you're sort of fighting the elements as opposed to gloriously looking at the snow-covered mountains on a Bluebird day.
Yeah. It's one of those kind of hidden things about 100-milers that people don't talk about, is there's a lot of 100-miler time that is just the zone of your headlamp and there's 10 feet of trail in front of you. But summer runs, that's, like Cascade, the sun doesn't really set until 8:30. You have twilight, and then the sun's coming up again at 6, so you're really just not into that. But a winter race, even some 50 cases, you're starting in the dark and you're ending in the dark, so it's different. It's a different experience.
No, for sure, exactly. So, yeah, we'll see. What's in your future calendar here? You've had a major program. Are you taking breather, or are you just stacking more and more stuff on?
No, I'm taking a breather. 300s in 10 months was good. It was kind of just a challenge for me. I turned 50 and I wanted to see, even though 2020 was kind of a shit year, I just wanted to see what I could make of it on my own. A lot of training on my own, a lot of racing on my own, but it worked out with getting those 300s, and now I'm just going to sit back and, same with you, I'm going to see what my wife's been up to, see what her running plans are. And she's not into the 50Ks, but she likes some 25Ks, and see if we can get this last bit of shoulder season and get up and do some alpine hikes and runs just for fun. And just to get out in the mountains and then see what the winter brings.
Yeah, absolutely. I do need to spend some time out there to kind of readjust myself because, obviously the mountains over here are beautiful. I'm not dissing on them in any way. But obviously I got hugely spoiled with a beer waiting for me every 3 miles, right? And so I need to sort of readjust my expectations when I'm out there.
And although I love training, when every run you finish and you think, was that enough training or was that too much training for X race in the future? I kind of want to just go run, and whether it's 5 miles or 20 miles, just be inspired by the run I did just because of the run, not because of its future goal.
That's a really, really great point. Absolutely. I mean, that freedom of not immediately trying to fit things into a training plan and measuring things up and engaging how you felt and how it was and checking the numbers in Strava and just saying, I'm just going to have a great time out there and see something and take the time to take the extra photos or whatever it may be. I think it's such an important part of our sport. And in some respects, that's how I started off trail running. I didn't come from this collegiate, competitive, having to do races all the time mentality. I came from this idea that I felt like I needed to run throughout the week to train my body because I felt very fat and sedentary after years of running my own business. And I wanted to be back in the mountains, and I wanted to feel good in the mountains and not every time I'm out there sort of hating myself that I'm not fit, right? And to know that I have this baseline fitness now to be able to just say, I'm going to just go and enjoy the mountains, enjoy the trails is an amazing feeling, right? Super. I mean, there's no better way to finish this podcast than on this note. Michael Linscott, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Thank you for letting me download my entire Monte Rosa experience to you. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks for telling
me. Yeah, absolutely. Again, congratulations on Cascade Crest and an absolutely incredible year of 10 months of racing. Yes. If people want to reach out to you, do you want to direct them anywhere? Or do you want to be hidden? Do you have an Instagram? Do you have a website?
I have an Instagram. Yeah, there's welcome to reach out. My Instagram is SILVAVIATOR, Silva Viator, which it's just a Latin phrase I made up that means trail walker or forest walker. So it's Silva Viator on Instagram.
Fantastic. We have that linked in the show notes for people who don't speak Latin. Yep. Fantastic. Michael, thank you so much, and we'll hear each other soon.
Thank you, sir.
All right. You've reached the end of the show, and as promised, I've got some more information about Singletrack. We have reached 200 episodes, and we've been interviewing some absolutely incredible people, but with 200 episodes, lots of changes happening. Biggest change is that the new home of Singletrack is going to be at singletrack.fm. Everything you expect you find on the website right there. You can subscribe, you can get info and gear, you can get info on all the people we've been interviewing over the last few years. Head over to singletrack.fm, the new home of Singletrack, the podcast. And the other announcement is that we're saying goodbye to Douglas Scott, my trusted and faithful co-host over the last 200 episodes. He has decided that a trail running podcast is not really exciting for him anymore. And so he's on to new things. Thank you, Doug, for being part of this podcast for so long. I know that trail running is my big passion, and you've been entertaining and participating in this for long enough. So I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for being here for so long. And with that, Singletrack is entering a new phase. We've got a whole bunch of amazing people lined up that we are going to be talking to, people that you've previously heard, new stories. I'm super excited to enter this new phase of Singletrack. We're keeping the name. We're keeping everything else the same. If you're subscribed, no major changes should happen. You should get new episodes in your feed. If it's going to happen weekly, I don't 100% know. Stay tuned of how this is going to roll out. But after this long summer break, Singletrack is back. Visit singletrack.fm for all the details.